The doctor was fighting to save my daughter in the emergency room. Outside, her mother-in-law said coldly, "She deserves it." I was about to answer her when my daughter's best friend walked up and said, "Do you want me to tell the whole hospital the real reason your daughter-in-law had the accident?" The entire hallway went silent. "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached." I'm sitting in my little house on the outskirts of the city with a yellowish dying light reflecting on the already faded walls. Tonight I'm alone, silently folding each sweater for Emily, my daughter. She called me yesterday with her little girl voice complaining that it was cold, and her coat was just a thin piece of fabric. I smiled, imagining Emily's face when she gets these sweaters. She would probably hug me suddenly, just like when she was little. The wall clock ticked, marking 10:45 at night. I had just sat down in my old armchair to take a sip of hot tea, feeling the warmth spread in the palm of my hand. Suddenly, the landline phone rang sharp and cold, cutting through the silence. I jumped, put down the cup, and my heart started beating a mile a minute. Who could be calling at this hour? Nobody calls this late, unless it's bad news. I picked up the phone with a hoarse voice. "Hello?" On the other side of the line, a woman's voice, hurried and trembling. "Are you Emily's mother?" "I'm Teresa, a nurse at St. Philip's Hospital. Your daughter is in the ER. You need to come immediately. She just had a car accident." I felt like my world was collapsing. An accident. My Emily. No, it couldn't be. She had just called me yesterday, laughing, saying she would come visit me this weekend. I jumped up and the teacup slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor as the liquid splashed everywhere. My hands were shaking, my head was spinning. What did she say? "Emily, how is she? Is it serious?" I almost yelled into the phone, but Teresa just repeated, "Come immediately." Quickly, I grabbed the first coat I could find, my hands trembling so much that I even dropped my wallet. My mind was blank. I could only see Emily's image, her radiant smile, her warm brown eyes. I had to get to her right now, but no taxi would answer. The network was failing and the phone just showed a busy signal. Desperate, I ran to Mr. Henry's house, my neighbor, a good man. I knocked on the door with all my strength, shouting, "Mr. Henry, please help me, Emily." She had an accident. Mr. Henry, with his gray hair, opened the door, and seeing me tremble, he didn't ask anything else. He just nodded. "Get in, I'll drive you." On the way to St. Philip's Hospital, I was curled up in a ball in the back seat, my hands clasped together. Mr. Henry drove fast, but for me everything seemed to be in slow motion. My head was full of horrible thoughts. What if Emily doesn't make it? I couldn't bear that thought. She is my light, my beloved daughter. Since my husband passed away 10 years ago, Emily has always been by my side, always making me laugh no matter how hard life was. I prayed in whispers to God, to the Virgin Mary, asking them to take care of her. When I got to the hospital, I rushed towards the emergency room, almost slipping on the shiny tile floor. The smell of disinfectant hit my nose, and the noise of machines and people's murmurs made me even more nervous. A doctor with a badge that said Stephen was standing in front of the emergency room door. His face was tense, his eyes full of worry. I ran to him, my voice breaking. "Where is Emily? How is she?" Before he could answer, Teresa, the nurse who called me, came running. She took my hand and with a choked voice said, "Calm down, please." Emily suffered a very strong blow to the chest. She lost a lot of blood. But most importantly, her heart just stopped. Hearing that, I froze. Her heart stopped. No, it couldn't be. My Emily, my healthy, full of life. Little girl couldn't go like this. I held onto the cold wall, my eyes glued to the glass of the emergency room. Through it, I saw Emily motionless on the bed, her black hair disheveled and her face pale. Around her, doctors and nurses moved quickly. One was doing chest compressions, another held a syringe. A tangle of wires covered her body, as if they wanted to forcibly tie down that fragile life. I wanted to scream, to run and hug her, but my feet were nailed to the floor. I could only stand there with tears streaming down my cheeks, whispering, "Emily, sweetie, don't leave me." The minutes passed like centuries. I didn't dare to blink, fearing that if I looked away, Emily would disappear. Suddenly, the heart monitor let out a soft beep, then another, and then it became more constant. Stephen turned around and shouted, his voice full of hope, "We have a pulse!" I felt like I was pulled out of an abyss. Emily's heart was beating again. My little girl was still alive. I fell to my knees in the hallway, crying my eyes out, thanking heaven and earth. My tears were no longer of pain, but of a joy mixed with the fear that hadn't yet left. I was sitting on one of those hard, cold plastic chairs in the hallway of St. Philip's Hospital. The cold white light from the ceiling made me shiver. A young nurse with her hair in a high bun came over and carefully placed a thin blanket over my shoulders. "Save your strength, ma'am," she said in a soft voice. "We're doing a CT scan, and we're going to monitor her pressure for a few more hours. Have some hot tea." She handed me a styrofoam cup. The warmth felt good in my hands, but my heart was still frozen. I nodded to thank her, trying to hold back the tears, but my head was a whirlwind. I stood up, trying to breathe deeply to calm myself. Just then, I heard the clinking of heels on the tile floor. When I turned, I saw Rose Jason's mother, my son-in-law's mother, walking in. She was wearing an expensive fur coat, her lips a bright red, and holding a new iPhone, talking to someone in a sharp tone. Before I could say anything, she hung up and looked me straight in the eye. Without a greeting, without a hint of concern, she blurted out a sentence that stabbed me like a knife in the heart. She deserved it. You know, I was stunned, as if I had been slapped. That she deserved it. My daughter, the girl I love more than my own life, was in an emergency room, and this woman dared to say that. I clenched my fists, trying to contain the rage boiling inside me. I was in a hospital. I couldn't make a scene. But before I could answer her, another voice was heard, calm but sharp. "So you want me to tell the whole hospital the real reason your daughter-in-law had the accident?" I turned around and saw Natalie, Emily's best friend. She was wearing a denim jacket, her hair loose to her shoulders, and a look full of determination. Rose froze, her red lips pursed. Natalie didn't wait for her to respond. She took out her phone and played a video. "Watch this," she said, her voice as cold as ice. I moved closer, my heart pounding. On the screen, I saw Jason, my son-in-law, in the middle of a lavish party. Around him was his mother, the very same Rose, along with Jason's sister and brother, the entire Miller family. They were toasting with wine glasses, laughing out loud. A man, his face red from alcohol, shouted, "Cheers to Jason and the baby! The Millers are finally getting an heir!" I was stunned, as if someone had punched me in the stomach. "What? What baby?" I blurted out, my voice trembling. Natalie sighed and looked at me with deep sadness. "It's his mistress's child," she said, lowering her voice. "A friend of mine recorded this video at the party today. She knows the Millers, they invited her. I sent it to Emily this afternoon." I just stood there, my head spinning. Emily received this video and then drove there, right? I looked at Natalie, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "Did she? What did she tell you?" Natalie nodded, her eyes red. "She asked me for the party's address. I guess she planned to go confront them." My whole body began to tremble, as if an electric current was running through me. So Emily, my daughter, saw that video. She found out Jason was cheating on her. She found out his whole family was celebrating another woman's baby. That shock probably made her lose control of the wheel. I put my hand to my chest, feeling my own heart stop. My Emily, my strong and cheerful girl, but also so fragile. I imagined her sitting at the wheel, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling, trying to get to that place to demand an explanation. And then the accident happened. I was just recovering when Rose spoke again, her voice full of contempt. "If she couldn't keep her husband, she has to face the consequences. In my family, we don't want weak women, and to top it off, sterile ones." That sentence was the last straw. I took a step towards her, ready to scream in her face to tell her that Emily was not a piece of merchandise for her to judge. But Natalie was faster and stopped me with her hand. She stared at Rose and with a clear, firm voice said, "So you want me to make this video public so everyone knows how proud the Millers are that their son is cheating on his wife?" The hallway fell into a dead silence. A few nurses nearby stopped talking and turned to look at us. A doctor passing by also stopped, curious. Rose turned pale, pursed her lips, and her eyes darted from side to side. She muttered something I didn't understand, something like "bunch of trash," and turned to leave, the clicking of her heels echoing down the hall. Natalie took my hand and whispered to me, "Don't pay them any mind. I'm not going to let them take advantage of Emily anymore." I sank into the chair, feeling as if the whole world was crushing me. But for the first time in my life, I saw a ray of light. Emily was no longer alone. Natalie, that girl who I thought was just another one of my daughter's friends, turned out to be the person willing to defend her. And I, her 68-year-old mother, couldn't just stand by and watch things happen. Minutes later, I was sitting on a cold stone bench in the hospital garden under the yellowish light of a lamppost that stretched my shadow on the ground. Natalie brought me here to get away from the curious glances of the nurses and relatives in the hallway. The night was cool, and I wrapped the old shawl I was wearing tighter, while my hands still clung to the cup of hot tea that Nurse Teresa had given me. The heat from the cup was nothing compared to the cold that gripped my heart. Natalie sat next to me in silence and played the video on her phone again. "Watch it again," she said in a low but firm voice, as if she wanted me to face the truth once more. The video was short, less than 2 minutes, but every image, every sound was like a stab in the soul. Jason, my son-in-law, standing in a flawless white shirt, raising a glass of wine with a radiant smile. Next to him, a young girl with a slightly bulging belly, clearly pregnant. The people around her called her Lucy with excited voices. Rose was right beside them, smiling from ear to ear, and even turned to shout in her shrill voice, "A grandson for the Millers! This time he's the real deal!" The sound of clinking glasses and laughter echoed as if they were celebrating a victory. I watched the screen with a knot in my heart, them celebrating while my Emily was in an emergency room fighting for her life every second. Natalie leaned into my ear and whispered, "See? They planned this party on purpose without Emily finding out. My friend told me they even told each other not to let Emily know anything." I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, where Jason, the same young man who used to call me Mommy in a sweet voice, was hugging Lucy by the shoulders, smiling as if nothing was wrong. I remembered the early days when Emily introduced him to me, telling me with such excitement that he had promised to love and protect her for life. I believed him. I thought that young man would be a support for my daughter. And now there he was next to another woman, while my daughter almost lost her life from the blow his own family had dealt her. I clenched my fists so hard that my nails dug into my palms until they almost bled, but I felt no pain. The real pain was in my heart, where every stab of betrayal felt stronger and stronger. "Emily, what time did she get this video?" I asked with a hoarse voice, almost breathless. Natalie checked her phone, opening the messages. "At 12:19 in the afternoon," she replied, her eyes red. After that, Emily wrote to me to ask for the restaurant's address. I sent it to her right away, but she never answered back. I did the math in my head. The accident happened around 1 in the afternoon, according to what Nurse Teresa told me. That meant that Emily, right after seeing the video, got in her car and drove straight to the party. I imagined her in the car, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling on the steering wheel, her mind flooded with the pain of betrayal. She probably thought about how she was going to confront Jason Rose, all that family celebrating the Miller's grandchild without her. Just thinking about it felt like I was suffocating. Natalie gently touched my shoulder, her voice trembling. "Ma'am, this isn't just infidelity. It's a plan. They want to get Emily out of the Miller family." I looked up at her. Natalie's gaze was firm, but also full of pain. "My friend told me," she continued, "that Rose has never liked Emily because she hasn't given them a child yet. They wanted Jason to have another wife, one who could give them a grandchild. Lucy was Rose's choice." Natalie's words were like pouring gasoline on the fire burning inside me. A plan. They had planned to get my daughter out of Jason's life as if Emily were an object that was no longer useful, something unworthy. I remembered the times Emily called me with a sad voice, telling me that Rose always compared her to Jason's friends, that she always criticized her for not knowing how to keep her husband. I would tell her, "Don't pay them any mind, daughter, just live your life well." But now I realized how foolish I had been. Living well is not enough. It's never enough when you're facing so much cruelty. "I understand now, Natalie," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm not going to stand by and do nothing." I stood up and looked towards the hospital building where Emily was in intensive care. If my daughter couldn't speak, then I would speak for her. I returned to Emily's bedside, where the cold, white light of the intensive care unit seemed to freeze my heart. More than 3 hours had passed since the accident, but Jason hadn't shown up. Not a call, not a text, not a single sign that he cared his wife was between life and death. I took Emily's hand. It was icy, with only a very faint warmth in her little fingers. It reminded me that she was still here. I whispered to her even though I knew she couldn't hear me. "I'm here, Emily. Don't be afraid." But inside, the rage and pain grew like a tide about to sweep everything away. I heard the clicking of shoes in the hallway. It was Rose who had returned. She sat in a chair in the waiting room a few steps from me, but she didn't even look towards Emily's room. Instead, she took out her phone and started making one call after another. I heard her clearly with her sharp, superficial voice, as if she were talking about going to the supermarket. "Hello, Spa, darling. Book me a massage for tomorrow at 10 in the morning, please." Then she made another call with a bossy tone. "Margarita, clean the living room well, and prepare another room for the new tenant." The new tenant. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms until it hurt. The new tenant was Lucy Jason's mistress, the one the whole Miller family was celebrating. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and went into the hallway, my voice trembling, but trying to stay calm. "Where is your son, Rose?" She didn't even look up, just waved her hand as if shooing away a fly. "Jason is busy. He can't always drop his business to come running." I stood there frozen as if I had been slapped. Busy. His wife was in an emergency room after her heart had stopped, and he was busy. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the fury that burned in my chest. "His wife is between life and death," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "And he's very happy with his mistress." "How can you say that?" Rose raised her head and looked at me as if I were crazy. Her eyes were cold, her red lips pursed, and then she let out a mocking little laugh. At least she knew how to give this family an air. "And you're Emily? She's a bundle of nerves who's good for nothing but causing trouble." That sentence was like a knife in my heart. My Emily, the daughter who had sacrificed so many years to be a good daughter-in-law, was a bundle of nerves. I turned my face away, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I wanted to scream at her to tell her that my Emily was worth more than the entire Miller family put together, but I knew it wasn't the time. I needed to save my strength to be with my daughter. Just then I heard other heels, this time sharper. Jessica, Jason's sister, entered with her husband dressed as if they were going to a party. She was wearing a tight Gucci dress, sparkling heels, and sunglasses, even though we were in a hospital hallway. Her husband, a short, fat guy with a fake smile, was by her side checking his phone. They approached Rose and whispered, but loud enough for me to hear every word. "Is Emily still alive, Mom? If not, we should start preparing the asset paperwork." I stood there, my blood running cold. The asset paperwork. My daughter hadn't even woken up. She was still fighting to live, and they were already thinking about dividing up her things. This was the family Emily once called her in-laws. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. Emily had dedicated her youth to loving Jason, to trying to fit into that family, putting up with the hints and contemptuous looks from Rose and Jessica. And now, while she lay motionless in a bed, they talked as if my daughter were just an obstacle to be removed from the path. Before I could react, a flower delivery man entered the hallway with a huge bouquet of red roses. He looked around and asked, "Family of Miss Emily?" I raised my hand, though I already had a bad feeling. He handed me the bouquet with a small card. I opened it and felt my heart stop as I read, "Hope you make it to the other side soon, Emily." The card was signed by Lucy. I looked at the flowers, then the card, feeling my world crumble. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. It was pure evil. Without a word, I borrowed some scissors from a nurse. In front of Rose and Jessica, I cut the card into tiny pieces and threw the entire bouquet into the trash can. The sound of the flowers falling was dry, like my heart breaking. Rose's eyes widened and she jumped up. "What are you doing? You'll pay for insulting my family." I looked her straight in the eye with a calm but sharp voice. "No, the ones who are going to pay are you for doing this to my daughter." I turned around and walked towards Emily's room, clutching Natalie's phone in my hand where that video was still saved. That night, I didn't go home. After what happened at the hospital, I couldn't leave Emily's side, not even to get a little sleep. I curled up in the hard plastic chair in the waiting room with the little blanket nurse Teresa gave me, which wasn't enough to ward off the cold I felt inside. The next morning, Natalie showed up. She brought me my purse, some personal items, and a hot tamale, whose corn smell reminded me of the days I used to make tamales for Emily when she was a little girl. "Eat something so you can get your strength up," Natalie said, her eyes full of concern. I nodded, but the bite got stuck in my throat. I wasn't hungry. I only wanted one thing: to see Emily wake up, smile, and call me Mom. At 7 in the morning, sharp Dr. Stephen came in. His voice was soft but serious. "Emily is stable for now, Linda. She can't wake up yet, but she has neurological reflexes. That's a good sign." Hearing him, I felt my eyes fill with tears. Stable. Those two words were like a small light in the midst of so much darkness. I stood up and went into the intensive care unit. Emily was there with a breathing tube in her mouth, her face pale but still beautiful like an angel's. I gently touched her cheek and whispered, "I know everything, sweetie. I'm not going to let them bury you in silence." I thought about the video Natalie showed me about Jason, about Rose, about Lucy, and especially about the man who was next to Lucy at the party. He seemed closer to her than Jason himself, and his look and smile were etched in my mind. When I first saw the video, I didn't pay much attention, but now that image was like a piece that didn't fit in my head. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just a betrayal. I took out my phone and texted Natalie. "The man who was next to the pregnant girl in the video, do you know who he is?" A few minutes later, Natalie sent me a close-up of the image with a message. "I'm not sure, but I think he's a friend of hers from college. His name is Joel." I saved the name and the photo, and my determination became clearer. I couldn't just sit in the hospital waiting while the Millers mocked Emily. I had to do something, find the truth, no matter how painful it was. That night I went home, took a shower, and put on clean clothes. The house was suffocatingly silent. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. I called Thomas, my nephew, who was in his final year of law school. He had worked as a summer assistant for Beatrice, my best friend, and a lawyer, so I knew he was good with paperwork and investigations. "Thomas," I said, my voice hoarse after a sleepless night, "I need you to find someone trustworthy for me, someone who doesn't ask too many questions, but who knows how to investigate discreetly." Thomas responded immediately with a decisive voice. "I know someone. Arthur Galvez. He was a detective, and now he's a private investigator. He's an upright man, but a bit blunt." I nodded, though Thomas couldn't see me. "Perfect. Get me a meeting with him." The next morning, I met with Arthur in a bakery near my house. He was a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a gaze as sharp as a knife. I put my phone on the table, showed him the video, and told him everything. Emily's accident, the party video, the cruel flowers from Lucy. I pointed to the photo of the man named Joel. "I want to know who this man is," I said in a firm voice. "What is his relationship with the pregnant girl, and if there's proof, I want photos, videos, whatever." Arthur raised an eyebrow and nodded. "How far do you want to take the investigation?" I looked him straight in the eye. "All the way. I need the truth." Arthur accepted the case. I gave him a $200,000 advance, the savings I had put together to give Emily when she had a baby next year. It was all I had, but I didn't hesitate for a second. If that money could help me protect my daughter, it was worth every penny. Arthur took the money and promised to call me when he had something. I left the bakery with a heavy heart, but also a little lighter. I had started, even if it was with a small step. On the way to the hospital, I decided to stop by the house where Jason and Emily lived. I had a key because I often went to clean and cook to help my daughter. The house was silent. No one was there. I put on gloves, a habit from my days working in the sewing workshop so I wouldn't leave fingerprints. I turned on my phone's flashlight and started going through the drawers and folders in Jason's study. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I needed proof, anything that could clarify this. In an old wooden file cabinet, I found a folder. My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages. It was a contract for a property transfer in Emily's name, the little house on the outskirts that my husband and I had left her. Next to it, there was a series of powers of attorney with a signature that looked like Emily's, but the stroke was shaky, not how she signed. I kept looking and found bank statements showing that Emily had been regularly depositing money into another account, which wasn't Jason's. I stood there with trembling hands and my head spinning. The Millers had not only betrayed Emily emotionally, they were also planning to steal her assets. I took out my phone, took a photo of everything, and copied it to a small USB drive I had with me. Carefully, I put everything back as it was and locked the door as if I had never been there. That night, I sent all the files to Thomas, asking him to encrypt them and save them in a secure folder. I also sent a copy to Beatrice. An hour later, Beatrice called me, her voice serious. "Linda, this is a good start. These papers show that something is wrong, but we need a knockout punch. Are you ready?" I squeezed the phone and answered with a firm voice. "I'll do whatever it takes to get justice for my daughter." 4 days passed since I tasked Arthur, the private investigator Thomas recommended, with everything. 4 eternal days in which I barely slept, sitting by Emily's side, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort that I didn't know if she could hear. Every day, Dr. Stephen came to give me news. Emily is more stable, but she still needs time. I would nod, but in my mind there was only one thought. I had to uncover the truth. I had to protect my daughter before she woke up. On the 4th night, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Arthur Short, but it made my heart race. "Tonight she's meeting that guy at a hotel in the Santa Rosa district. I'm going to record everything." I read the message over and over, my hands shaking. Santa Rosa, an old neighborhood with narrow alleys and cheap hotels. I didn't know what was happening, but my gut told me this was the last piece I needed. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the plastic chair looking out the hospital window at the dim streetlight. I prayed not just for Emily, but also for myself, asking God to give me the strength to face what was coming. The next morning, I met Arthur at a small cafe near a church. The smell of roasted coffee did nothing to calm me. Arthur, with his salt and pepper hair and cold gaze, placed an external hard drive on the table. "I have what you need," he said, his voice deep but confident. He connected the drive to his laptop and played a video. I held my breath, my eyes glued to the screen. The image was clear. Lucy Jason's mistress entering a small old-looking hotel with a flickering neon sign. She was wearing a tight red dress, her pregnant belly was noticeable, but she walked with confidence. Waiting for her at the reception was Joel, the man I saw in the party video. They hugged, laughed, and then kissed right there in front of the receptionist without a care in the world. The hallway camera recorded them going up to the room, chatting animatedly. Lucy was laughing, and Joel patted her on the shoulder as if they had known each other for a long time. After almost 40 minutes, they came down. Arthur switched to an audio recording, and what I heard made my blood run cold. Joel's voice, deep but full of arrogance, echoed. "The whole Miller family is a bunch of idiots. They think this baby is their blood. No one knows he's my son." Lucy let out a laugh, her voice high-pitched. "Let them support him. In a couple of years, we'll make up an excuse and take off to the States. And that's it." I just sat there, my hands trembling. The cup of coffee in front of me was already cold. So the baby the Millers were celebrating, the one Rose called the Miller's grandson, wasn't Jason's son. It was all a sham, a deception to use Emily and steal her properties. I looked at Arthur, my voice breaking. "Is this real?" He nodded, his gaze serious. "The original is on this hard drive. I recommend you give it to your lawyer and don't send it to anyone to avoid problems." I nodded, clutching the hard drive in my hand, feeling like I was holding a bomb about to explode. I left the cafe and drove straight to Beatrice's office. She was already waiting for me, and her eyes lit up when I walked in. I gave her the hard drive and told her everything. She watched the video, listened to the audio, and when she was done, she took my hands firmly, her voice filled with emotion. "Linda, you've just destroyed their whole moral facade. With this proof, plus the papers you found at Jason's house, we will win this case, no doubt." I looked at Beatrice, feeling both relief and a weight at the same time. Win the case. I didn't just want to win. I wanted the Millers to pay for putting my daughter through this nightmare. That night, I sat alone on my balcony under the pale moonlight that illuminated the empty street. The sound of the old TV's news broadcast in the living room mixed with a distant ambulance siren. I thought about Emily, about the years she lived under the Millers' control, about the times she called me with a sad voice to tell me about Rose's criticisms. I thought about Lucy and Joel, their disgusting plan, and Jason's terrifying silence. I knew a great storm was brewing, but this time I was going to be the one directing it. Monday morning, I woke up with a stone in my chest. I hadn't slept well just a few intermittent hours, my head filled with images of Emily in the hospital bed, Lucy's cruel audio, and the forged papers I found at Jason's house. Today was the day that, together with Beatrice, my lawyer, we would start to act. We had already agreed. Beatrice would file an emergency complaint with the court for forgery of property documents. I would act as the legal representative on Emily's behalf since she still hadn't woken up. I looked in the mirror. My face was tired, my eyes red, but my gaze was no longer that of a mother who only knew how to pray. I was ready to fight. I called Thomas, my nephew, and asked him to look for Emily's old signatures, anything from previous years, like receipts, letters, or old contracts. We needed to compare them with the shaky signatures on the powers of attorney I had found. Thomas, with the sharpness of a law student, promised to handle it carefully. "I'm going to check every legal trace, Aunt Linda," he told me over the phone, his voice determined. "They're not getting away." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and felt a warmth in my chest knowing I wasn't alone. In the afternoon, I went to a small cafe near the hospital, a discreet place Beatrice had chosen. It was hidden in an alley with old brick walls and a few wooden tables. When I entered, I saw that Beatrice, Dr. Stephen, Natalie, and Thomas were already seated. No one was smiling. No one said more than a brief hello. I put down my bag, sat down, and felt as if the entire world weighed on my shoulders. On the table in front of me was a thick folder, the photos of the suspicious money transfers, Natalie's party video, and the hard drive with Arthur's proof of Lucy and Joel's meeting at the hotel. Everything was there like bullets ready to take down the Millers. For the first 5 minutes, no one spoke. Only the hum of the air conditioner and the clinking of a spoon in a coffee cup could be heard. I looked around and saw that everyone had a heavy gaze, but also one full of determination. Finally, Dr. Stephen broke the silence. He adjusted his glasses and said in a grave voice, "I reviewed Emily's latest CT scan. There's a slight improvement. She's starting to have reflexes to light, although very weak." I felt my heart pound and tears wanted to come out. Slight improvement. Just 2 words, but they were like a small flame in the darkness. "Thank you, doctor," I said, my voice choked. "Then I need everything to be ready for when my daughter wakes up, so she sees she's not alone." Natalie put her phone on the table. The screen lit up with a series of notifications. "These are 9 missed calls from Jason," she said with a mocking tone. "He started calling me last night after he found out that you, Linda, had sought a lawyer." She sighed and shook her head. "He's scared." I looked at the screen and saw Jason's name repeated over and over. 9 missed calls. Yes, he was scared. Scared that everything he and his family had hidden was about to come to light. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Let him be afraid. I wasn't going to let him get away. Beatrice took out a sheet of paper with a handwritten action plan, each point as clear as a map. She pushed it towards me and said seriously, "We're going to do this. First, I'll file a lawsuit against Jason for adultery, document forgery, and misuse of Emily's assets. I'll also ask the court to immediately freeze their marital assets to prevent them from transferring anything. And finally, if necessary, we'll show the video of Lucy and Joel at the preliminary hearing." She looked at me with her sharp eyes. "Do you agree, Linda?" I nodded without hesitation. Beatrice gave me a stack of papers that needed my signature to authorize her. My hand trembled a little as I took the pen, but my gaze was firm. I signed each page feeling like I was laying each stone to build a wall to protect Emily. Each signature was a promise to my daughter. Mom is not going to let them hurt you anymore. When I finished, I gave the papers back to Beatrice and said, "Go ahead, I want them to pay." Thomas, sitting next to me, smiled slightly. He whispered to me with confidence, Aunt Linda this time. The Millers won't be able to deny it. Everything has traces, images, witnesses. I've already checked the powers of attorney. The signatures don't match Emily's old samples. With one more legal verification, they'll have no escape. I looked at Thomas and felt a warmth in my heart. This young man, only 22 years old, was by my side like a true partner. Then let's pull back the final curtain, I said with a lighter but determined voice, so the light can enter that nest of rats. 10 days after the meeting at the cafe, Beatrice informed me that the civil court had sent an emergency summons to Jason and the Miller family. The neighbors started whispering and the gossip spread like wildfire. They say Linda sued the entire Miller family. A lady from the fruit stand told me with curious eyes. I just nodded without responding. I didn't need the neighbors' gossip to give me strength. Every second sitting by Emily's side in the hospital, seeing her connected to a ventilator, was enough to be determined to go all the way. Beatrice advised me not to appear in public too soon to avoid the Millers' tricks, but I couldn't wait any longer. I wanted to confront Jason in the place where he felt safest, his company where Emily had been a project director before they suspiciously forced her to resign. I wanted him to know that I was no longer the old lady who only cried and prayed. That morning, I put on a black long-sleeve blouse, my brown leather bag, put my hair up in a bun, and put on a little makeup to hide the wrinkles of exhaustion. I looked in the mirror and saw a 68-year-old woman, but with a gaze as sharp as a knife. Beatrice and Thomas accompanied me like two faithful guards. We arrived at Jason's corporate building, an imposing glass tower in the heart of the city. The young receptionist with blonde hair and a forced smile tried to stop us. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" she asked, her voice a bit shaky. I didn't answer her. I just showed her Beatrice's card and said coldly, "We're here to talk about the forgery of the powers of attorney in the name of this office." The girl looked at the card. Her eyes widened, and she quickly dialed a number. The floor manager appeared instantly pale and stammered, Come into the conference room, please." I walked with my head held high, feeling like I owned the place. 15 minutes later, Jason entered the room. He was wearing a gray suit, but his face was distraught, his jaw tight, his hands in his pockets as if he wanted to hide his nervousness. He looked at me and forced a smile as if it were a joke. "What are you doing here? Emily hasn't even woken up, and you're already thinking about the paperwork." His tone made my blood boil, but I didn't answer him. I just gave Beatrice a signal, and she opened her briefcase, placing all the evidence on the glass table one by one. Natalie's party video, the hotel video of Lucy and Joel with the clear audio, the bank statements showing the diversion of Emily's money, and the forged contract in my daughter's name. Jason turned pale, his hands shaking as he reviewed the documents. Rose and Jessica, who were already in a corner of the room, couldn't hide their bewilderment. Rose pursed her lips, and Jessica avoided my gaze, clutching her Gucci bag. Beatrice spoke, her voice as sharp as a razor. "We're not here to ask for permission. We're here to inform you that Linda is Emily's legal representative, and that all these acts of forgery will be made public at the trial next week. You should start preparing." I looked Jason straight in the eye, my voice calm but full of strength. "My daughter is not dead. She's just waiting for the net of justice to close." He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Rose behind him couldn't hold back anymore and intervened. "You're nobody in this matter. Do you think you can go against the Millers?" I turned to her, my gaze firm. "I am Emily's mother." I said each word like a nail in wood. "I stayed silent when you insulted her, when you stole her assets, when you celebrated the pregnant mistress, because I didn't know anything. But no one, not even an old woman like me, stays silent forever when the truth comes to light." No one in the room dared to respond. I stood up and left, leaving behind the bewilderment in that luxurious conference room. Beatrice and Thomas followed me in silence, but I felt their firmness. As I left the building, the bright sun hit my face, but I didn't feel warmth. I felt light, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had faced Jason the Millers, and I hadn't trembled. The next morning, when I arrived at the hospital to see Emily, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Natalie sent me a series of messages with links to online news. The first headline hit me: Mother-in-law's fury, 68-year-old woman exposes son-in-law's infidelity, $1 million fortune at risk of being frozen. I checked the articles and saw photos of me entering Jason's company along with details of the lawsuit. Someone had leaked the information, perhaps a company employee or someone who witnessed yesterday's confrontation. But I didn't care. The truth had begun to spread like light, dispelling the darkness. The morning of the trial, I stood in front of the city's Superior Courthouse, my heart pounding in my chest. The building, imposing with its cold white stone columns, was packed. Press media and even former friends of the Miller family were there whispering. I heard the murmurs. Did Linda really sue the entire Miller family? They say Emily almost died, right? I walked through the crowd with my head held high, ignoring the curious stares. Today, I was not just a 68-year-old mother. I was the voice of Emily, the one who was going to bring down the Millers' theater of lies. I sat in the plaintiff's row next to Beatrice and Thomas. Natalie was sitting behind with a cold, fixed gaze on the courtroom door. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms to stay calm. When Jason entered, I almost didn't recognize him. He was wearing a dark blue suit and sunglasses, but his face was gaunt, his beard grown out as if he hadn't slept in days. Next to him were Rose and Jessica, both dressed more discreetly than usual, but unable to hide their nervousness. I looked at them no longer with rage, only with a cold determination. Today, they were going to see that Emily was not alone. The judge, Helen Roberts, a woman in her 50s, entered the room. She wore thin-framed glasses, and her expression was stern but fair. She banged the gavel and announced, "Today, this court will review the case of property document forgery, abuse of power, and evidence related to marital and financial deceit." Her voice echoed, silencing the room. I took a deep breath, feeling that everything I had done the sleepless nights, the search for papers, the confrontation at the company, had led me to this moment. Beatrice stood up, her voice soft but powerful. "Your Honor, I don't represent a simple client. I represent a young woman lying unconscious in an intensive care unit due to pressures that cannot be expressed in words. And today, her mother, Mrs. Linda Aguilar, will be the voice she cannot yet use." I felt my eyes fill with tears, but I held back my gaze fixed on Beatrice. She signaled to the court staff, and Natalie's party video was projected onto a large screen. The images of Jason, Rose, Jessica, and Joel appeared clearly, their laughter echoing Rose's voice shouting, "A grandson for the Millers!" When the video ended, the room fell silent. I turned to Rose, my voice calm but sharp. "You said my daughter deserved it while you were hiding this terrible truth." Jason's lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, stood up to object. "This video could be manipulated, edited. We request that the court verify its authenticity." But Beatrice was unfazed. She presented a police forensics report along with the raw data extracted from the hotel camera, unedited. Then she played the audio of the conversation between Lucy and Joel. Joel's voice echoed cold and arrogant. "The whole Miller family is a bunch of idiots. They think this baby is their blood. No one knows he's my son." Lucy's laugh mixed in sharp as a knife. "Let them support him. In a couple of years we'll take off to the States, and that's it." Jason's face turned livid. He lowered his head, clutching the seat. Rose and Jessica looked at each other, terrified. The room was in a deathly silence. Only the agitated breathing of some could be heard. Beatrice continued, her voice growing sharper. "We also have the financial document statements from Miss Emily's account showing constant withdrawals to an unidentified account suspected to belong to Miss Lucy. And here," she said, holding up the signature analysis, "the power of attorney to transfer Miss Emily's properties was forged. The signature does not match the old samples." Judge Roberts adjusted her glasses and looked intently at Jason. "Was Miss Emily aware of these transfers?" I stood up, even though Beatrice signaled for me to calm down, but I couldn't stay silent. "Your Honor," I said, my voice trembling but firm, "my daughter only found out after receiving that video. She got in her car that night intending to go to the party to confront them and unfortunately had an accident on the way. That day, my daughter was clinically dead. but she is still alive because she has not yet been able to say her last word." The room fell completely silent. A reporter in the back row discreetly wiped away a tear. I looked around and saw in the eyes of strangers a look of compassion. I said no more. I just sat down and took Beatrice's hand. She squeezed it gently, as if telling me I had done well. Beatrice continued by requesting the court to immediately freeze all usurped assets related to Jason and Rose to protect Emily's rights. Judge Roberts nodded and declared, "The court approves the request for a temporary freeze. The public hearing will be held in 2 weeks." When the session ended, I stood up and left the courtroom. Before I left, I looked at Jason one last time. His head was down, not daring to look at me. "I once loved you like a son." I said, my voice low but clear, "But now you will pay for what you did." He didn't respond, just lowered his head further. Rose and Jessica rushed him out, but I knew they had no escape. A week after the first hearing, I was still sitting by Emily's bed, as I had every day for the past 3 weeks. The Sunday morning sun filtered through the blinds, illuminating my daughter's pale face. With a damp cloth, I gently cleaned her hands, just like I did when she was a little girl and had a fever. Her hands were cold, but I felt a faint warmth, like a reminder that she was still fighting. I whispered, "You have to be strong, Emily. Mom is here, I'm not leaving." As I cleaned her hand, I suddenly felt her fingers move slightly, as if trying to grasp my hand. I was startled, my heart pounded, and I called the nurse. "Teresa, come quick. Emily, she moved." 5 minutes later, Dr. Stephen came in. His face was serious, but his eyes lit up as he examined her. He put a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Her natural reflexes have returned. She could wake up in the next few hours." Hearing that, tears welled up, but not from pain. For the first time in many days, I felt real hope. I stayed there motionless, my eyes fixed on Emily. I counted every second, every minute, praying for her to open her eyes. At 4:20 in the afternoon, like a miracle, Emily slowly opened her eyes. Her brown eyes, weak but still bright, looked directly at me. I burst into tears and squeezed her hand. "I'm here, Emily. I'm here now, my love." My voice broke, tears were streaming, but I didn't care. My Emily was back. She looked at me. Her lips moved a little, trying to say something. I leaned in and heard the first phrase she whispered. "He betrayed me, didn't he, Mom?" Her question was like a knife in my heart. I nodded. The tears came again, but I didn't hide anything from her. I told her everything that had happened in those 3 weeks. The video of the Millers' party, Rose's cruelty, Lucy's evil flowers, and the audio of Lucy and Joel. I told her about the forged documents, the confrontation at Jason's company, and the court hearing. Emily listened with red eyes, but she didn't cry. She just squeezed my hand tightly, as if looking for an anchor. The next day, Dr. Stephen allowed her to speak for 10 minutes, so as not to strain her. Beatrice, Natalie, and I entered the room. Emily was propped up on some pillows, her face still pale, but with more life in her eyes. She looked at Natalie and said in a low voice, "Thank you, Natalie. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have known anything." Natalie smiled, her eyes teary. "I just did the right thing, Emily." Then she turned to me and whispered, "I don't remember anything after seeing the video. I just remember getting in the car and then seeing another car's very bright lights. After that, nothing." I took her hand, trying to hold back the tears. Beatrice, with her professionalism, briefly explained the legal process. Then she looked directly at Emily and asked, "Emily, do you want to continue with the lawsuit as the plaintiff? Your mother has done a lot, but now you have the right to decide." Emily was silent for a moment. Tears ran down her cheeks. Then she nodded, her voice firm, though weak. "They took everything from me. My love, my trust, my money. I can't take it anymore." Hearing Emily, I felt a new strength inside me. She was no longer the fragile girl who called me crying to tell me about Rose's criticisms. My Emily was back, and she was ready to fight. A few days later, she was moved to a regular room. I bought her a new nightgown, a pale pink one with white lace, her favorite color since she was a little girl. When I helped her put it on, Emily smiled for the first time in many days. "You still remember my favorite color, Mom?" she said, her voice choked. I hugged her and whispered, "I remember everything that has to do with you, Emily." Another week passed, and Emily was speaking more clearly. She was strong enough to sign the papers that named her as the main plaintiff. Beatrice came with a new folder and a smile. "It's time, Emily. We're not just going to expose them, we're going to make them pay." Emily nodded, her eyes shining, no longer afraid. I looked at her full of pride. My little girl was back stronger than I ever imagined. Before I left, I suggested to Emily that she record a voice message to send to those who betrayed her. She took my hand, her voice trembling but clear. "I don't hate you for betraying me. I only regret ever calling you family." I felt my heart ache. Emily didn't hate them, but I knew it hurt. I turned on my phone and recorded her words, feeling it was a final declaration of war. I looked up at my daughter's serene face and whispered, "We have one hearing left, my love, but this time you won't be fighting alone." I left the room feeling light but determined. I thought about the years Emily lived under the Millers' control, about the times she tried to please them only to receive contempt. I thought about my own journey from being a mother who only prayed to becoming a woman who dared to confront a powerful family. I was 68 years old, but I had never felt so strong. Emily had woken up, and that was my greatest victory. I clenched my fists, looking ahead, knowing that the next trial would be where true justice would be served and where my daughter finally would raise her voice. The story you just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I really wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.